She thought poverty had broken him, until the day he signed the deed that made beggars of them all. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday night, turning the circular driveway of the Grand Crystal Hotel into a mirror that reflected the golden lights above. Inside the grand lobby, where crystal chandeliers cast prismatic shadows across Italian tile, Clara Benson stood behind the mahogany front desk, her feet aching in shoes she'd resoled 3 times because buying new ones meant choosing between comfort and groceries. Welcome back, my amazing family. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your love and support mean the world, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's get right into the story. She watched the revolving door spin, admitting another guest in a Burberry coat, trailing expensive luggage and the scent of privilege. This was her world now, surrounded by wealth she would never touch, serving people who looked through her like she was part of the furniture. But Clara needed this job. Her mother's medical bills didn't pay themselves, and the collection agency had stopped being polite about the timing of their calls. Miss Benson. The voice cut through her thoughts like a knife through butter. Mr. Crane, the hotel manager, appeared at her elbow, his cologne overpowering in its desperation to announce importance. The Whitmore party needs fresh towels in the presidential suite. Immediately. Of course, Mr. Crane. Clara kept her voice even, professional. She'd learned early that showing frustration only gave him ammunition. And Miss Benson? He leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. Try to be invisible up there. Mrs. Whitmore complained last week that you made eye contact. These people don't pay $5,000 a night to be acknowledged by the help. The word stung, but Clara swallowed the feeling down. She'd swallowed so much over the past 2 years working here that sometimes she wondered if there was any of herself left, or if she'd become nothing but a repository for other people's cruelty. She nodded and moved toward the service elevator, her reflection in the lobby's mirrors showing a woman who looked older than her 28 years, exhaustion etched in the slight slump of her shoulders, the careful blankness of her expression. The presidential suite was empty when she arrived, thank God. She moved quickly, replacing towels, straightening items that didn't need straightening, and making herself invisible even when no one was watching. It had become second nature. When she returned to the lobby 40 minutes later, the rain had intensified. Thunder rolled across the Chicago skyline, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see lightning illuminating the lake in brief, brilliant flashes. The lobby had quieted, that lull between dinner reservations and late-night arrivals when the hotel seemed to hold its breath. That's when she saw him. The revolving door spun, admitting a figure that seemed to carry the storm in with him. Water dripped from his jacket, not a designer piece, but something worn and practical, the kind you'd find at a second-hand store. His jeans were faded, his boots scuffed, and he carried a single duffel bag that had seen better days. But it was his face that caught Clara's attention, exhaustion carved into handsome features, dark hair plastered to his forehead, and eyes that held something she couldn't quite name. Not desperation, exactly. Something quieter. Something observant. He approached the desk slowly, as if uncertain of his welcome, and Clara felt her professional smile soften into something genuine. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Grand Crystal Hotel. How can I help you? His voice, when it came, was low and careful. I need a room for the night. Just something simple. Of course. Clara's fingers moved across the keyboard. Let me see what we have available. May I have your name, please? James. James Cooper. He shifted the duffel bag on his shoulder, and she noticed his hands. Working hands, she thought, though something about them suggested they were capable of more than labor. There were faint scars across the knuckles, old wounds that had healed into stories she would never know. All right, Mr. Cooper. Our standard rooms start at $350 per night. We also have. That's fine. He pulled out a wallet, worn leather held together at the seams with what looked like determination and hope. Whatever you have. Clara processed the reservation, trying not to notice the way he counted the bills, the slight hesitation before he handed over his credit card, a basic bank card, nothing like the platinum and black cards she usually handled. She swiped it through the machine and waited. Declined. Her stomach sank. She tried again, entering the numbers manually this time, hoping it was just a magnetic strip issue. Declined. I'm so sorry, Mr. Cooper, she said quietly, leaning forward slightly so her voice wouldn't carry. It seems there's an issue with this card. Do you have another form of payment? Something flickered across his face, not embarrassment, but a kind of resigned understanding, as if he'd expected this. Let me try my other card. He produced a second one, equally worn, and Clara took it with gentle fingers, treating it like it mattered, because she knew what it felt like to watch your last hope get fed into a machine that might reject you. Declined. The machine's verdict seemed to echo in the opulent space. Clara looked up at James Cooper, ready to apologize again, to suggest payment plans or holding the reservation while he sorted out his banking, but she never got the chance. Miss Benson. Mr. Crane's voice rang out across the lobby, sharp and carrying. He strode toward the desk with the purposeful gait of a man who'd found an opportunity to demonstrate his authority. Is there a problem? No, sir, Clara said quickly. Just a small. Both cards declined. Mr. Crane had materialized beside her, his eyes on her computer screen. Mr. Cooper, is it? I'm afraid the Grand Crystal Hotel has strict policies about payment. We don't run a charity here. James straightened slightly, his jaw tightening. I understand. If you could just give me a moment to call my bank. Your bank. Mr. Crane's laugh was cruel in its musicality. Sir, it's 11 o'clock at night. Banks are closed. And frankly, if you can't afford our rates, perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the budget motels off the highway. We cater to a certain caliber of clientele here. Clara watched color rise in James's cheeks, not the red of embarrassment, but something else. Anger, maybe, or disappointment. She'd seen that look before in her own mirror, on nights when the world reminded her of her place in it. Mr. Crane, she interjected softly, perhaps we could. Miss Benson, step back from the desk. The manager's words were bullets, precise and meant to wound. He turned to James with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We can't have people attempting fraudulent check-ins. It makes our actual guests uncomfortable. Fraudulent. James's voice remained level, but Clara heard steel underneath. My cards are legitimate. There's obviously a technical issue. Obviously. Mr. Crane's tone dripped with sarcasm. Which is why you came to a 5-star hotel in wet clothes and a bag that looks like it's been through a war. Sir, we both know what's happening here. You saw the lights, thought you'd try your luck with some sympathy. It won't work. We have security cameras. We have protocols. The lobby had gone silent. Other guests had paused their conversations, their movements, to watch the scene unfold. Clara saw them, a couple in evening wear by the elevator, a businessman at the bar, the concierge pretending not to stare. They were all witnessing this moment, this public humiliation, and no one was going to stop it. I'll leave, James said quietly, but there was something in his eyes now, something that made Clara's breath catch. Not defeat. Calculation. I apologize for the inconvenience. See that you do. Mr. Crane had already turned away, dismissing him, moving toward the couple by the elevator to assure them that the situation was handled, that they needn't worry about such unpleasantness during their stay. James picked up his duffel bag, and Clara watched him walk toward the revolving door, toward the storm that still raged outside. Something in her chest twisted, that same feeling she got when she passed homeless people on her way home, that helpless rage at a world that treated dignity like a luxury item only the wealthy could afford. She made a decision. Mr. Cooper. Her voice surprised her with its volume. She came around the desk quickly, ignoring Mr. Crane's sharp look, and caught up with James before he reached the door. In her hands, she carried an umbrella from the stand near the desk, black, hotel-branded, the kind they gave to VIP guests. Please take this. The rain's not letting up. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment the noise of the lobby faded. His eyes were gray, she realized, the color of storm clouds, and they held a sadness that had nothing to do with declined credit cards or closed banks. You don't have to, he said. I know. Clara pressed the umbrella into his hands. But it's miserable out there, and... She trailed off, unsure how to finish. Because you deserve kindness? Because I know what it feels like to be treated like you're less than human? Because in a building full of people, I'm the only one who still remembers what it means to see another person suffering? Thank you, James said, and his voice carried weight that made the words more than just pleasantries. What's your name? Your full name? Clara Benson. He repeated it softly, as if committing it to memory. "Thank you, Clara Benson. I won't forget this." Then he was gone, swallowed by the revolving door and the rain-soaked night beyond. Clara stood there for a moment, watching his figure disappear into the darkness, the umbrella a small circle of protection against the storm. "Miss Benson." Mr. Crane's voice was ice. "My office. Now." The next 15 minutes were a masterclass in humiliation. Mr. Crane's office was all dark wood and false prestige, filled with awards the hotel had won and photos of him shaking hands with celebrities who'd stayed there. He sat behind his desk like a judge at a tribunal, and Clara stood before him like a defendant who'd already been found guilty. "Do you have any idea how inappropriate that was?" he began, his voice low and dangerous. "You gave hotel property to a vagrant. You ran after him like you were trying to save him. In front of guests, Clara. Paying guests who expect a certain standard." "He needed help," Clara said simply. "He needed to leave, which he did. Your job is to maintain the hotel's image, not to play Mother Teresa with every con artist who walks through that door." He wasn't a con artist. His cards were declined. Twice. Which means he either has no money or he's running some kind of scam. Either way, it's not your concern. Mr. Crane leaned forward, his eyes hard. "You've been on thin ice for months, Miss Benson." The complaint from Mrs. Whitmore. The incident where you offered to help that Japanese family find their lost child instead of calling security immediately. You seem to have trouble understanding your role here. Clara bit her tongue, tasting blood and frustration. The Japanese family had been frantic. Their 6-year-old had wandered off, and security had been dealing with a drunk guest on the 4th floor. She'd helped them search, had found the little girl in the gift shop, had reunited them. The mother had cried with relief. And somehow, that had become a mark against her. "I understand my role," she said quietly. "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you think you're here to befriend people. To hand out charity. To make everyone feel special." He sat back, steepling his fingers. "You're here to process check-ins, handle reservations, and stay invisible unless someone of importance needs you. That's it. That's the job." "Yes, sir." "This is your final warning, Miss Benson. One more incident like tonight, and you're done. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal clear," she wanted to say. "Clear as the champagne you sip in this office, while I work double shifts to afford my mother's insulin. Clear as the hierarchy that puts you above me despite the fact that I do twice your work for a quarter of your pay. Clear as the reality that in this building, kindness is a liability and cruelty is a virtue." But she just nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good. Get back to the desk. And Clara." He stopped her at the door. "If you see that man again, you call security immediately. We don't need his type around here." Clara returned to the front desk in silence, her hands shaking slightly as she logged back into the computer. The lobby had returned to its normal rhythm, guests coming and going, the piano bar starting up with soft jazz, the revolving door spinning its endless circle. But something felt different now. Or maybe she felt different. Like a line had been crossed that she couldn't uncross. Her shift ended at 2 in the morning. She clocked out, gathered her things from the employee locker room, and stepped out into a city that had been washed clean by the storm. The rain had stopped, leaving behind that particular smell of wet pavement and possibilities. She walked toward the bus stop, her feet aching, her mind replaying the night's events. She didn't know then that the man she'd given an umbrella to would change everything. She didn't know that James Cooper wasn't his real name, that the declined credit cards had been deliberate, that she'd just passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. All she knew was that she'd done what felt right, and in a world like hers, that was a radical act of rebellion. The bus arrived, nearly empty at this hour, and Clara claimed a seat by the window. As the city slid past, bright lights and dark alleys, wealth and poverty existing side by side, she thought about dignity. How it wasn't something you could buy or sell. How it lived in the small moments, the tiny choices, the decision to hand someone an umbrella in a storm. She thought about James Cooper's gray eyes, the way he'd looked at her like she was someone worth remembering. And then she let herself forget, because dwelling on kindness was a luxury she couldn't afford. Tomorrow would bring another shift, another day of being invisible, another round of swallowing her pride to keep a job that barely kept her afloat. The bus rumbled through the night, carrying her home to a small apartment in a neighborhood the Grand Crystal Hotel's guests would never visit, and Clara Benson closed her eyes against the fluorescent lights, unaware that her life had just begun to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Clara's alarm went off at 9 in the morning, 4 hours after she'd finally fallen asleep. She slapped at her phone until the ringing stopped, then lay in bed staring at the water stain on her ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere she'd never go. Her body ached in that specific way that came from standing for 8 hours straight, and her mind felt foggy, caught between exhaustion and the low-grade anxiety that had become her constant companion. Her apartment was a studio in Pilsen, the kind of place landlords called cozy and charming in listings that failed to mention the radiator that clanked like a ghost was trapped inside it, or the way the shower only produced hot water if you ran it for exactly 7 minutes first. But it was hers, or rather, it was hers as long as she could keep making rent, which meant getting up, getting dressed, and getting back to the Grand Crystal Hotel for another shift. She hauled herself out of bed and moved through her morning routine on autopilot. Coffee from the machine she'd bought at a thrift store. Toast from bread that was one day away from needing to be thrown out. A shower that started cold and ended lukewarm because she didn't have 7 minutes to waste. She dressed in her work clothes, black slacks, white blouse, sensible shoes, and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror that had a crack running through it like a fault line. The woman looking back at her seemed tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. 28 years old with eyes that had seen too much disappointment. Her mother's daughter, she thought. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, skin the color of mahogany that refused to show the exhaustion she felt. She'd inherited her mother's resilience too, that stubborn refusal to break no matter how hard the world pushed. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother, "Morning baby. Feeling good today. Don't worry about me." Which meant she wasn't feeling good, but didn't want Clara to worry, which meant Clara would spend her entire shift worrying anyway. Her mother had diabetes and a heart condition that required medications Clara's insurance barely covered. They'd had to choose, once, between the name-brand pills and the generic ones that didn't work as well. Clara still remembered the look on her mother's face when she'd said, "Get the cheap ones, baby. We'll make it work." That's what they always did. Made it work. Stretched dollars until they screamed. Chose between heat and groceries, between doctor's visits and rent. Made it work. Clara locked her apartment door, 2 deadbolts and a chain because this neighborhood had its rough edges, and headed down the stairs. Mrs. Chun from 2B was sweeping the hallway, her tiny frame bent over a broom that seemed too big for her. "Morning, Clara," she said in her accented English. "You work again today?" "Always working, Mrs. Chun." "You work too hard. Young woman like you should be out having fun, meeting a nice man." Clara smiled despite herself. Mrs. Chun said this at least once a week, this belief that Clara's problems could be solved by romance, as if love paid bills or cured diseases. "I'll keep that in mind. I mean it. Life is short. Don't spend it all working for people who don't appreciate you." The words hit harder than Mrs. Chun probably intended. Clara thought about Mr. Crane, about the way he'd looked at her last night like she was something dirty that needed to be cleaned up. About how she'd given a stranger an umbrella and somehow that had been wrong, had been worth a reprimand, had been evidence of her failure to understand her place. "Have a good day, Mrs. Chun," she said softly, and headed out into the late morning sun. The bus ride to the hotel took 40 minutes, winding through neighborhoods that told Chicago's story in layers. The gentrified areas where coffee shops charged $7 for a latte, the working-class blocks where corner stores sold loose cigarettes and checked IDs with suspicious eyes, the gleaming downtown where the Grand Crystal Hotel stood like a monument to wealth's indifference. Clara watched it all pass, her reflection ghosting across the window. She thought about James Cooper despite herself. About his gray eyes and the way he'd said her name like it mattered. About the fact that he'd thanked her for an umbrella as if she'd given him something precious. Most guests at the Grand Crystal didn't notice her enough to be rude. She was furniture to them, background noise. But he had seen her. She wondered where he'd ended up last night. Some cheaper hotel, probably. Or maybe he'd slept in his car if he had one. Or maybe, and this thought made her stomach twist, maybe he'd spent the night on the streets in the rain, because she hadn't done enough to help him. But what could she have done? Given him money she didn't have? Smuggled him into an empty room and risked her job? The job she needed to keep her mother alive? The bus lurched to a stop downtown, and Clara gathered her bag, pushing thoughts of James Cooper away. He was gone. A brief encounter on a rainy night. Nothing more. The Grand Crystal Hotel looked different in daylight, less magical, more like what it was, a building made of money and maintained by people who would never have enough of it. Clara entered through the employee entrance in the back, a plain door that led to plain hallways, the unglamorous arteries that kept the hotel's heart beating. She clocked in, checked the schedule, and felt her stomach sink. Mr. Crane had changed her shift. Instead of working the front desk, she'd been assigned to housekeeping. It wasn't technically a demotion, housekeepers made the same wage, but everyone knew what it meant. It was punishment. A reminder of where she stood in the hierarchy. Clara. Maria, one of the housekeepers, waved from across the break room. She was a round woman in her 50s with laugh lines that spoke of a life that had tried to beat her down but failed. Welcome to the real work, Mija. Front desk was making you soft. Clara managed a smile. Guess I needed humbling. Crane's an ass, Maria said matter-of-factly, handing Clara a housekeeping cart loaded with supplies. We all heard what happened last night. You gave some poor guy an umbrella, and Crane acted like you'd set the building on fire. Don't let him get to you. Easier said than done. Most things are. Maria squeezed her shoulder. Come on. I'll show you which rooms need doing. And Clara? For what it's worth, you did the right thing. That man needed kindness, and you gave it to him. That counts for something. Does it? Clara wanted to ask. Does kindness count when it costs you your dignity? When it gets you punished? When it changes nothing except making you feel foolish for caring? But she just nodded and followed Maria into the service elevator, pushing her cart toward whatever rooms needed their sheets changed and their toilets scrubbed, toward another day of being invisible, toward a future that felt as fixed and unchangeable as the crack in her bathroom mirror. She had no way of knowing that James Cooper hadn't forgotten her. That he'd spent the night in a suite 3 blocks away, in a hotel he already owned, making phone calls and reviewing files. That her name, Clara Benson, had been added to a very short, very important list. That everything was about to change. The presidential suite on the 18th floor smelled like cigars and expensive cologne, the kind of scent that lingered in fabrics and announced wealth even after its source had departed. Clara pushed her housekeeping cart through the door, Maria beside her with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd cleaned 1,000 rooms and would clean 1,000 more. Henderson's checked out this morning, Maria said, consulting her tablet. Big corporate guy, here for some conference. Left a mess, apparently. That was an understatement. The suite looked like a small hurricane had passed through. Room service trays scattered across surfaces, champagne bottles on the coffee table, towels everywhere except where they belonged. Clara surveyed the damage and felt that familiar resignation settle into her bones. This was her world now. Not processing elegant check-ins or greeting guests with professional smiles, but scrubbing other people's dirt, erasing evidence of their presence so the next wealthy person could pretend they were the first to ever sleep in these sheets. You take the bedroom, I'll start on the bathroom, Maria said. And Clara? Don't look so miserable. At least up here, we don't have to deal with Crane breathing down our necks. Small mercies, Clara thought. She began stripping the bed, pulling off sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Egyptian cotton, 1,000 thread count. She'd read the hotel's marketing materials enough times to know these details, to understand the language of luxury even if she'd never speak it as a native. They worked in companionable silence, the kind that came from shared understanding. Maria hummed something under her breath, a Spanish song Clara didn't know but found soothing anyway. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago sprawled in all its afternoon glory, the lake a strip of blue that looked almost peaceful from this height. You ever wonder what it's like? Clara asked suddenly. To stay in a place like this? Maria emerged from the bathroom, rubber gloves dripping. Every damn day, Mija. My daughter, she got married last year. You know where they honeymooned? Right here. In this hotel. Not this suite, but a regular room. Cost them 4 nights what I make in a month. She shook her head, but there was pride in her voice too. But she's doing better than me. College degree, good job. She doesn't have to clean toilets for people who don't even see her. You think she sees you different now? Now that she's, Clara trailed off, unsure how to finish. Successful? Made it out. Maria smiled, sad and knowing. She loves me the same. But yeah, there's a distance sometimes. Like we're speaking different languages. She tries to give me money, and I take it because pride doesn't pay bills, but it hurts a little. Every time. Clara understood that hurt. It was the same one she felt when her mother insisted she was fine, when she refused Clara's help with a stubbornness that came from not wanting to be a burden. The hurt of loving someone and watching them struggle and being unable to fix it. They finished the suite in an hour, transforming chaos back into pristine luxury. Clara took one last look around before they left, at the view she'd never wake up to, at the marble bathroom she'd never soak in, at the life she'd never live. Then she pulled the door shut and moved on to the next room. The afternoon passed in a blur of repetitive tasks. Strip beds, scrub toilets, vacuum carpets, restock amenities. Her back ached, her hands were raw from cleaning chemicals, and somewhere around room 1847, she realized she'd stopped thinking entirely. Her body moved on muscle memory, while her mind drifted to that place where exhaustion and meditation blurred together. It was almost 5 when her radio crackled. "Clara, you there?" It was Jennifer from the front desk, her voice tight with something Clara couldn't identify. "I'm here. What's up? Can you come down to the lobby? Mr. Crane wants to see you." Clara's stomach dropped. Not again. What had she done now? "I'm in the middle of..." "Now, Clara," he said now. Maria shot her a worried look. "Want me to come with you?" "No, it's okay. Probably just wants to yell at me for breathing wrong or something." Clara tried to make her voice light, but fear had wrapped itself around her throat. She couldn't lose this job. She couldn't. The service elevator descended slowly, each floor a small eternity. Clara caught her reflection in the polished metal doors, rumpled uniform, hair escaping from its bun, exhaustion written in every line of her face. She tried to smooth herself down, to look more presentable, but there was only so much she could do. The lobby was busy when she emerged, full of afternoon check-ins and guests milling about with that particular aimlessness of people on vacation. Clara kept her head down, moving toward Mr. Crane's office, preparing herself for whatever fresh humiliation waited. But Mr. Crane wasn't in his office. He was in the lobby, standing near the front desk, and he wasn't alone. There were men in expensive suits clustered around him, men with briefcases and serious expressions. The kind of men who made decisions that affected other people's lives without losing sleep over it. Clara approached slowly, confusion joining her anxiety. "Ah, Miss Benson." Mr. Crane's voice was strange, not angry, but something else. "Nervous? These gentlemen would like to speak with you." One of the suits stepped forward, a man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of tan that came from yacht ownership. "Miss Benson, I'm Richard Carlyle, representing Hayes International Hotels. We have some questions for you regarding an incident that occurred here 2 nights ago." Hayes International Hotels. The name meant nothing to Clara, but the way Mr. Crane shifted his weight, the way his face had gone pale, that meant something. "I don't understand," Clara said quietly. "What incident?" A man attempted to check in. His credit cards were declined. "You gave him an umbrella." Carlyle consulted a tablet in his hands. "A man named James Cooper." The world tilted slightly. Clara gripped the edge of the front desk to steady herself. "Yes. Yes, that happened. But he wasn't, I was just being kind," Carlyle finished. "You were being kind to someone you believed had nowhere else to go." He looked up from his tablet, and his expression was unreadable. "Miss Benson, how would you characterize your interaction with Mr. Cooper?" This felt like a trap, but Clara couldn't see the shape of it. Mr. Crane stood rigid beside the suits, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Other staff members had paused their work, pretending not to watch but absolutely watching. "He needed help," Clara said simply. "His cards weren't working, and it was raining, and I just wanted to make sure he'd be okay. That's all." "That's all," Carlyle repeated softly, as if testing the words. He exchanged glances with the other suits, some silent communication passing between them. "Miss Benson, what if I told you that James Cooper isn't who you think he is?" Clara's heart hammered. "I don't think he's anyone. I don't know him." "Exactly. You didn't know him. You helped him anyway." Carlyle closed his tablet with a decisive click. "Miss Benson, Mr. Cooper would like to meet with you. Are you available tomorrow morning? Say 10 o'clock. I have a shift. You'll be paid for your time, Carlyle said smoothly. This is important, Miss Benson. Very important. Will you come? Clara looked at Mr. Crane, searching for guidance, but his face was a mask of barely controlled panic. She looked at Jennifer behind the desk, at Maria who had appeared from the elevator, at all these witnesses to whatever was happening. Yes, she heard herself say. I'll come. Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed watching shadows move across her ceiling, her mind spinning through possibilities like a slot machine that refused to land on anything solid. Who was James Cooper? What did he want with her? And why did men in $1,000 suits care about an umbrella given to a stranger in the rain? By the time her alarm went off at 8, she'd already been awake for hours, had already showered, dressed, changed her outfit 3 times, and consumed enough coffee to make her hands shake. She settled on a navy dress she'd bought for her mother's birthday dinner 2 years ago, the nicest thing she owned that didn't smell like cleaning chemicals or sweat. The address Carlyle had given her wasn't the Grand Crystal Hotel. It was an office building in the Loop, all glass and steel, the kind of place where serious money lived. Clara stood on the sidewalk outside, staring up at its gleaming height, feeling impossibly small. A doorman in a pristine uniform opened the glass door. Miss Benson. She blinked. How did you? Mr. Carlyle is expecting you. 23rd floor. The elevators are straight ahead. The lobby was cathedral quiet, filled with abstract art that probably cost more than Clara would earn in a lifetime. Her shoes clicked against polished floors as she walked to the elevator bank, each step feeling like a declaration of her foreignness in this world. A woman in a Chanel suit gave her a once-over, and Clara felt herself shrink, felt the careful armor of her dress dissolve under that casual assessment. The elevator rose smoothly, silently, counting off floors with digital precision. Clara watched her reflection in the mirrored walls multiply into infinity, endless versions of herself, all looking equally terrified. The 23rd floor opened into a reception area that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Sleek furniture, more expensive art, a receptionist who was beautiful in that intimidating, untouchable way. Clara Benson. The receptionist's smile was professional perfection. Right this way. She was led down a hallway lined with doors that probably opened onto power and influence, past people who moved with the confidence of those who'd never been thrown out of anywhere. Finally, they stopped at a corner office, and the receptionist knocked once before opening the door. Miss Benson is here. The office was massive, with windows that offered a view of the city that made Clara's breath catch. But she barely noticed the view because her attention was fixed on the man who stood from behind the desk. James Cooper. Except he didn't look like James Cooper anymore. Gone were the worn jeans and faded jacket. In their place was a tailored suit that probably cost more than her car, hair styled with careful precision, and an air of authority that seemed to fill the entire room. But the eyes were the same, those gray storm cloud eyes that had looked at her with such quiet sadness 2 nights ago. Miss Benson, he said, and even his voice sounded different. Still low, still careful, but now carrying weight. Thank you for coming. Please sit. Clara sat because her legs had stopped working properly. I don't understand. I know. And I apologize for the confusion. He returned to his seat, and Carlyle materialized from somewhere to stand beside him. My name isn't James Cooper. It's James Westbrook. And I own Hayes International Hotels. The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara tried to process them, to make them make sense, but her brain had apparently decided to stop functioning. You what? I own Hayes International Hotels, James repeated gently. We're one of the largest luxury hotel chains in North America. 43 properties across the continent, with plans to expand. But you. Clara's voice came out small. Your credit cards. You had nowhere to stay. I had plenty of places to stay. That was the point. James leaned forward, his hands folded on the desk. Miss Benson, Clara, may I call you Clara? She nodded, still trying to understand. Clara, every few months, I visit one of our properties unannounced. I don't tell them I'm coming. I don't call ahead. I just show up, usually dressed like I can't afford to be there, and I watch how they treat me. How they treat someone they think has no power, no money, no influence. Understanding began to dawn, cold and terrible. The Grand Crystal Hotel. You were testing them. I was testing them, he confirmed. And they failed. Spectacularly. Your manager humiliated me in front of a lobby full of guests. He called me a fraud, suggested I was running a scam, and had me thrown out without any attempt to help or understand the situation. Clara thought about that night, about Mr. Crane's cruel smile, about the other guests watching like it was entertainment. That's what he does. To anyone he thinks is beneath him. I know. I've read the complaint files. 47 formal complaints about Mr. Crane in the past 2 years alone. Discrimination, harassment, creating a hostile work environment. All quietly settled, swept under the rug by the previous ownership. James's expression hardened. Hayes International acquired the Grand Crystal Hotel last week. The previous owners were happy to sell a property that was bleeding guests and reputation. What they didn't know was that I'd already visited. That I'd already seen what kind of place they were running. You bought the hotel, Clara said slowly. You bought the entire hotel. I did. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to walk in there as the new owner and make some significant changes. He paused, his gray eyes finding hers. But before I do that, I need to talk to you. Because in a building full of people who failed my test, you passed. Not because you knew who I was, you didn't. Not because you expected anything in return, you didn't. You passed because when you saw someone struggling, your instinct was to help. Clara's hands were shaking. She gripped them together in her lap. It was just an umbrella. It wasn't just an umbrella. It was dignity. It was kindness without expectation. It was seeing me as a person who mattered. James stood and walked to the windows, silhouetted against the city. Do you know how rare that is, Clara? In my world? I'm surrounded by people who are kind to me because I'm rich. Because I can do things for them. Because they want something. You didn't want anything. You just cared. I was raised to care, Clara said quietly. My mother always said that kindness costs nothing, so there's no excuse not to give it freely. James turned back to her, and something in his expression softened. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She is. She's. Clara stopped, unsure how much to share. But something about this moment, about the surreal quality of sitting in this office with this man who wasn't who she'd thought he was, made her honest. She's sick. Diabetes. Heart problems. I worked at the hotel, because the insurance barely covers her medications. Because I need every dollar to keep her alive. I know, James said gently. I had my team look into you. I hope you don't mind. I needed to understand who you were before I made you an offer. Clara's heart stopped. An offer. The Grand Crystal Hotel needs new management. Someone who understands that hospitality isn't about making people feel small so you can feel big. It's about service. Genuine service. Making people feel welcome, regardless of their bank account. He moved back to his desk, pulled out a folder, and slid it across to her. I'd like you to consider becoming the new general manager. The world tilted. Clara stared at the folder like it might explode. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. The salary is detailed in there, along with benefits that include comprehensive health coverage, the kind that would cover all your mother's medications, no copays. He watched her carefully. You don't have hotel management experience, I know, but you have something more valuable. You have heart. And you can learn the rest. Clara opened the folder with trembling fingers. The number on the first page made her vision blur. It was more than 3 times what she currently made. The health benefits were even better than he described. Coverage for everything, for specialists, for medications that her mother's current insurance called not medically necessary. Why? She whispered. Why me? Because in a moment when you had everything to lose, your job, your income, your ability to care for your mother, you still chose kindness. You still chose to see another human being and help them. James sat back down, his voice quiet but intense. I can teach anyone hotel management. I can't teach them to be decent. You're already decent, Clara. Let me teach you the rest. Clara sat in that glass-walled office for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, staring at the folder in her hands like it contained secrets to the universe. The number kept swimming in her vision, $85,000 a year, plus bonuses, plus benefits that would transform her mother's life from a constant struggle into something manageable. Something almost normal. I need time, she heard herself say, to think about this. James nodded, as if he'd expected this. Of course. Take the weekend. We're not making any announcements until Monday morning. That's when I'll be formally introducing myself to the staff as the new owner. He paused. But Clara, I want you to understand something. This offer isn't charity. I'm not doing this because I feel sorry for you. I'm doing this because you're exactly what that hotel needs. What my entire company needs, honestly. A reminder that we're in the business of treating people like they matter. I don't know anything about running a hotel, Clara said, her voice small. You know how to treat people with respect. That's the foundation. Everything else, budgets, staffing, operations, we have training programs for that. You'll have support. Mentorship. And if you decide after 6 months that this isn't for you, we'll find you another position in the company. But I think you're going to surprise yourself. Carlyle, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. Miss Benson, if I may. I've worked with Mr. Westbrook for 15 years. I've seen him hire dozens of managers across all our properties. He's never made an offer like this before, identifying someone from an entry-level position and elevating them to general manager. He believes in you. And Mr. Westbrook's instincts about people are rarely wrong. Clara looked between them, these two men in their expensive suits in their expensive office, offering her a life she'd never dared imagine. It felt like a dream. Like any moment she'd wake up in her studio apartment with the cracked mirror and the clanking radiator and realize none of this had been real. Can I ask you something? She said to James. Anything. That night, when your cards were declined, when Mr. Crane was humiliating you, you didn't fight back. You didn't tell him who you were. Why? James was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes distant. Because I wanted to see how far he'd go. How cruel someone would be when they thought they had all the power. He looked back at her. And I wanted to see if anyone would stop him. If anyone in that entire building would choose kindness over compliance. No one did. Except you. I'm not special, Clara said. I've been on the other side of that cruelty. I know what it feels like. I couldn't watch someone else go through it without trying to help. That's exactly what makes you special, James said softly. Empathy isn't common, Clara. Not real empathy. Not the kind that costs you something. She thought about Mr. Crane's office, about his final warning, about how close she'd come to losing everything just for handing someone an umbrella. It almost did cost me everything. I know. And you did it anyway. He stood, extending his hand across the desk. Think about my offer. Call me by Sunday evening with your answer. The number's in the folder. Clara stood on shaky legs and shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, grounding. Thank you. For seeing me. For this opportunity. Even if I don't, even if I can't, just thank you. Clara. He held her hand a moment longer, his eyes serious. You can. I wouldn't have offered if I didn't believe that absolutely. The only question is whether you believe it. The bus ride home felt surreal. Clara clutched the folder to her chest like a lifeline, watching the city slide past with new eyes. The same streets, the same buildings, but everything looked different now. Like reality had shifted slightly to the left, and she was still trying to catch up. She thought about calling her mother, but what would she say? Hey Mom, remember that guy I gave an umbrella to? Turns out he's a billionaire who wants to make me a hotel manager. It sounded insane. It was insane. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maria. You okay? Heard you got called to some meeting. Crane's been in his office all day with the door closed. Something's happening. Clara stared at the text, unsure how to respond. I'm fine, she typed finally. We'll explain later. But how did you explain this? How did you put into words that your entire life had just been offered a chance to transform, and you were terrified to reach for it because what if you weren't good enough? What if you failed? What if this was all some elaborate mistake? Her apartment felt smaller than usual when she got home. She set the folder on her tiny kitchen table and just stared at it, afraid to open it again, afraid that this time the number would be different, that she'd imagined it all. But when she finally opened it, everything was still there. The salary. The benefits. The detailed job description. A letter of intent that just needed her signature. A future that seemed impossible and yet was somehow real. She picked up her phone and called the one person who would understand. "Baby." Her mother's voice was warm, concerned. "What's wrong? You never call during the day." "Mama." Clara's voice broke slightly. "Something happened. Something big. Can I come over?" "Of course. Always. I'll make tea." Her mother's apartment was in Bronzeville, a one-bedroom place she'd lived in for 20 years. It was filled with photographs and memories, with furniture that had seen better days but was cleaned and maintained with stubborn pride. Her mother, Diane, sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, listening as Clara explained everything. The rainy night, James Cooper who wasn't James Cooper, the offer that felt too good to be true. When Clara finished, silence filled the small kitchen. Her mother's face was unreadable, that expression she got when she was processing something significant. "Mama." Clara prompted. "Say something." "I'm trying to figure out," Diane said slowly, "why you sound like you're not going to take it." "I didn't say." "Baby, I know you. I know that voice. That's your 'I'm not good enough' voice." Diane set down her mug and reached across the table to take Clara's hands. "So let me ask you something. If this man had offered this job to someone else, someone with your heart, your work ethic, your kindness, would you think they deserved it?" "Of course." "Then why don't you deserve it?" Clara's throat tightened. "Because I don't know how to do it. I've never managed anything. I barely finished community college. I'm just..." "Just what? Just a woman who works herself to exhaustion to take care of her sick mother? Just someone who treats people with dignity even when it costs her? Just a person with enough courage to show kindness in a place that punishes kindness?" Diane's grip tightened. "Clara Marie Benson, you listen to me. You've been managing chaos your entire life. Managing bills that don't add up. Managing jobs that don't appreciate you. Managing a mother who's falling apart and trying to pretend she's not. If you can manage all that, you can manage a hotel. But what if I fail?" "Then you fail. And you learn. And you try again." Her mother's eyes were fierce now, bright with unshed tears. "Baby, I have spent your entire life watching you make yourself small. Watching you accept less than you deserve because you didn't want to seem ungrateful or ambitious or too much. And I let you because I was scared too. Scared that if you reached too high, the world would knock you down and I couldn't protect you." She paused, her voice breaking. "But this man, this James Westbrook, he's not offering you charity. He's offering you a chance. And if you don't take it, if you turn this down because you're scared, then I failed you. I taught you to be afraid instead of brave." Clara was crying now, tears running down her face unchecked. "I am scared, Mama." "Good. Be scared. Be terrified. And do it anyway." Diane pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her tight. "You gave a stranger an umbrella in a storm. That took courage. This is just another umbrella, baby. Just another storm. And you already know how to weather those." They sat there for a long time, Clara crying into her mother's shoulder like she was a child again, feeling the weight of possibility and fear and hope all tangled together. When she finally pulled back, her mother's face was wet with tears too. "You really think I can do this?" Clara whispered. "I know you can. The question is, do you?" Clara thought about the Grand Crystal Hotel. About Mr. Crane and his cruelty. About the Japanese family she'd helped. About Maria and Jennifer and all the other employees who worked their hearts out for a place that didn't value them. About James Westbrook's gray eyes and his quiet certainty that she was exactly what that hotel needed. "I want to," she said. "I want to so badly." "Then that's your answer." Sunday evening, Clara sat on her bed with her phone in her hand, the number from James Westbrook's business card glowing on the screen. She'd been staring at it for 10 minutes, her thumb hovering over the call button, her heart performing acrobatics in her chest. Just press it, she told herself. Just make the call. But once she made this call, once she said yes, everything would change. There would be no going back to the safety of invisibility, to the comfort of low expectations. She would be stepping into a spotlight she'd spent her entire life avoiding. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, "Be scared and do it anyway." Clara pressed call. It rang twice before his voice came through, warm and professional. "James Westbrook." "Mr. Westbrook, it's Clara Benson." A pause, and then his tone shifted, became somehow softer. "Clara, I was hoping you'd call. Have you made a decision?" "I have." She took a deep breath, felt it fill her lungs with possibility. "I accept. I'd like to be the general manager of the Grand Crystal Hotel." The silence on the other end lasted just long enough to make her panic. Had she misunderstood? Was the offer conditional on something she'd missed? Before James spoke, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm very glad to hear that. Very glad." There was movement on his end, the sound of papers shifting. "We'll need to move quickly. I'm meeting with the entire hotel staff tomorrow morning at 9. I'd like you there, if possible. Not as an employee being addressed, but standing beside me. As my new general manager." Clara's stomach flipped. "Tomorrow? That's so fast. I don't believe in drawing these things out. The staff deserves to know who's running their hotel, and they deserve to know that things are changing. That the culture of cruelty and discrimination is over." He paused. "I won't lie to you, Clara. Tomorrow is going to be difficult. There will be people who resent your promotion. People who think you haven't earned it. Mr. Crane, especially, is not going to take this well." "I know." Clara thought about Crane's face, about how he'd looked at her like she was nothing, about how that look was going to change to something uglier, rage, maybe, or contempt. "I'm ready." "Good. Because you're going to need that strength." "But Clara." His voice became serious, almost gentle. "I want you to remember something tomorrow. You're not there because of charity or luck. You're there because you demonstrated the single most important quality any leader can have, the ability to see people's humanity, even when it costs you something. Don't let anyone make you forget that." "I'll try not to. I'll have Carlisle send you the details for tomorrow, where to meet, what to expect. And Clara? Get some rest. Tomorrow, we change everything." Clara did not rest. She lay awake most of the night, her mind running through scenarios, imagining Crane's reaction, wondering how her former coworkers would look at her. Would they be happy? Resentful? Would they think she'd slept her way into this position, that she'd somehow manipulated or deceived her way to the top? By the time her alarm went off at 6, she'd maybe slept 2 hours. She showered, standing under water that finally ran hot because she'd let it run long enough, and dressed in the navy dress again, her armor, she thought. Her way of telling the world she belonged in spaces that had always told her she didn't. The email from Carlisle had come through at midnight. She was to meet James at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the hotel at 8:30. They would walk in together at 9, when the staff meeting was scheduled to begin. Clara arrived at the coffee shop at 8:15, too nervous to be late. She ordered a tea she wouldn't drink and sat by the window, watching the Monday morning rush of Chicago come to life. People hurried past with coffee cups and briefcases, with the determined expressions of those who had places to be and purposes to fulfill. Soon, that would be her. She would be one of them, someone with purpose, with authority, with a title that commanded respect. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. At exactly 8:30, a black car pulled up outside the coffee shop. James Westbrook stepped out, and Clara's breath caught. He was in a different suit today, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a confidence that seemed to radiate from him like heat. He spotted her through the window and smiled, a genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He entered the shop and approached her table. "Ready?" "No," Clara admitted. "But I'm here anyway." That's all courage is, showing up even when you're terrified. He gestured to the door. "Shall we?" The walk to the Grand Crystal Hotel was short but felt endless. Clara was aware of everything: the morning sun warming her face, the click of her shoes against the sidewalk, the solid presence of James beside her. He didn't speak, seemed to understand that she needed this moment to gather herself. They rounded the corner, and the hotel came into view. Her hotel now, she realized. The place where she'd been invisible for 2 years was about to become the place where everyone saw her. "What if they hate me?" she asked suddenly. James stopped walking and turned to face her. Some of them might. People resist change, especially when that change disrupts the power structures they've grown comfortable with. He held her gaze. But the ones worth keeping, the ones who actually care about doing good work and treating people well, they're going to respect you. Maybe not immediately, but they will. You just have to give them the chance to see what I already see. And what's that? Someone extraordinary pretending to be ordinary. The words settled into Clara's chest like a benediction, like a prayer. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and nodded. Okay. Let's do this. They entered through the main entrance, not the employee door Clara had used for 2 years, but the grand revolving door that admitted guests and important people. The lobby opened before them in all its morning glory, staff moving through their routines, guests checking out, the normal rhythm of a luxury hotel on a Monday morning. And then someone noticed. Jennifer at the front desk froze, her eyes going wide. She nudged her coworker, who looked up and stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Conversations died. Within seconds, the lobby had gone silent, every staff member staring at James Westbrook in his expensive suit, at Clara Benson in her navy dress, at the two of them together in a way that made no sense according to the old rules. Mr. Crane emerged from his office, drawn by the sudden quiet. His eyes found James first, a moment of confusion, then found Clara, and his expression transformed into something ugly. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, striding toward them. "Miss Benson, you're not scheduled for." Mr. Crane. James's voice cut through the lobby like a blade, quiet but absolute. "I'm James Westbrook, CEO of Hayes International Hotels. As of last week, we are the new owners of this property. I've called a mandatory staff meeting for 9 o'clock in the conference room. I suggest you attend." Crane's face cycled through emotions: confusion, realization, fear, and finally a desperate attempt at professional composure. "Mr. Westbrook, of course. I had no idea we weren't informed that. That was intentional. Now if you'll excuse us, Miss Benson and I have some preparations to make." James placed a hand on Clara's back, gentle and grounding, and guided her toward the conference room. Behind them, Clara could hear the explosion of whispers and the chaos of confusion and speculation. But she kept walking, kept her head high, and kept moving forward into the future she'd chosen. In the conference room, James turned to her. "You're doing great. I haven't done anything yet. You walked in here with your head up. That's everything." He checked his watch. 15 minutes until the meeting. "Let's go over what's going to happen." The conference room filled slowly, reluctantly. Staff members trickled in wearing expressions that ranged from curious to terrified, taking seats around the long table while others stood along the walls. Clara recognized all of them: Jennifer and the other front desk clerks, Maria and the housekeeping staff, the concierge team, the restaurant workers. People she'd worked alongside for 2 years, suddenly seeing her in a context that made no sense. She stood beside James at the head of the room, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. Her hands wanted to shake, so she clasped them in front of her, holding herself still through sheer force of will. Mr. Crane entered last, positioning himself near the door as if already planning his escape. His face had settled into a mask of professional neutrality, but Clara could see the rage simmering underneath. The calculation. He was a man who'd built his identity on having power over others, and he could sense that power slipping away. At exactly 9 o'clock, James began. "Good morning. For those who don't know me, I'm James Westbrook, CEO of Hayes International Hotels. As of last Monday, Hayes International is the new owner of the Grand Crystal Hotel." His voice carried authority without arrogance, filling the room with calm certainty. "I'm here today because this property is undergoing significant changes, and you all deserve to hear about them directly from me." The room was silent. Clara could feel the tension like a living thing, coiled and waiting. 3 weeks ago, James continued, I visited this hotel as a guest. I dressed like an ordinary traveler, carried a worn bag, and attempted to check in. My credit cards were deliberately set to decline. I wanted to see how this establishment treated someone who appeared to have no money, no status, no power. He paused, letting that sink in. The results were disappointing. Mr. Crane shifted uncomfortably. Several staff members glanced his way. I was humiliated, called a fraud, accused of running a scam. And I was thrown out of this hotel in front of a lobby full of guests, without any attempt at understanding or assistance. James's gray eyes swept the room. That kind of treatment is unacceptable. It's not hospitality, it's cruelty. And it ends today. Someone in the back, Clara thought it was Michael from the restaurant, raised a tentative hand. Sir, if I may ask, who knew about this test? No one. That was the point. I needed to see the truth of this place, not a performance designed to impress an owner. James's expression softened slightly. But I want to be clear. I'm not here to fire everyone or burn the place down. I'm here because I saw something that night that gave me hope. He turned to Clara, and suddenly every eye in the room followed. One person in this entire building treated me with dignity. One person saw someone struggling and chose kindness. Miss Clara Benson offered me an umbrella, offered to help me find alternative accommodations, treated me like a human being who mattered. James's voice carried conviction that made Clara's chest tight. And for that act of basic decency, she was reprimanded, called into an office and told she'd crossed a line, given a final warning for the crime of being compassionate. The room erupted in whispers. Maria was nodding, her eyes bright. Jennifer looked stunned. Others seemed to be processing, calculating what this meant. That told me everything I needed to know about the culture here, James said. A place where kindness is punished is a place that's lost its way. So we're going to find it again. He gestured to Clara. Effective immediately, Clara Benson is the new general manager of the Grand Crystal Hotel. The whispers became gasps. Heads turned. Clara felt the weight of dozens of stares, felt judgment and surprise and confusion all directed at her like spotlights. She wanted to disappear, to run, to apologize for taking up space. But James's hand found her shoulder, grounding her. I know some of you are surprised by this decision, he continued. Miss Benson doesn't have traditional hotel management experience. But she has something far more valuable. She understands what hospitality actually means. She knows how to treat people with respect, regardless of who they are or what they can do for her. That's the foundation we're building on. Mr. Crane's voice cut through the room, sharp and incredulous. With all due respect, Mr. Westbrook, this is absurd. Miss Benson was a front desk clerk. She has no qualifications to run a hotel of this caliber. This is a multi-million-dollar property, not some charity project. The room went silent again, but this time it was different. Dangerous. Clara felt James go very still beside her. Mr. Crane, James said quietly, I'm glad you brought that up. It gives me an opportunity to address another change. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and opened it. Over the past 2 weeks, my team has conducted a thorough review of this hotel's operations. We've examined financial records, guest complaints, employee reports, and internal communications. Crane's face was losing color. We found 47 formal complaints filed against you in the past 2 years. Discrimination based on appearance and perceived economic status. Harassment of staff members. Creating a hostile work environment. All of these complaints were settled quietly by the previous ownership, swept under the rug to avoid bad publicity. James closed the folder. That ends now. Mr. Crane, you're terminated effective immediately. You'll be escorted out by security, and you'll receive a severance package as outlined in your contract. But your employment with this hotel, and with Hayes International, is over. The room exploded. Shocked exclamations, hurried conversations. Michael actually let out a small cheer before catching himself. Clara watched Crane's face cycle through emotions, denial, rage, panic, before settling on cold fury directed entirely at her. This is because of her, he spat, pointing at Clara. Because she played you. Made herself look like some kind of saint, when really, she treated another human being with basic decency, James interrupted, his voice hard now. Something you seem fundamentally incapable of understanding. Security will be here shortly to collect your belongings and escort you out. I suggest you use this time to reflect on how your own actions led to this moment. 2 security guards appeared at the door as if summoned. Crane looked between them, between James and Clara, and for a moment she thought he might actually lunge at her. But then something in him deflated, and he straightened his tie with shaking hands. You'll regret this, he said to Clara, his voice low and venomous. Both of you will. This hotel will fall apart without me, and everyone will see you for the fraud you really are. Mr. Crane, Clara heard herself say, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. The only fraud in this room is the man who built his career on making other people feel small so he could feel important. I hope whatever you do next teaches you that power built on cruelty never lasts. His face went purple. The security guards moved forward, and Crane allowed himself to be led out, his exit marked by a silence so complete Clara could hear her own heartbeat. When the door closed behind him, the room seemed to exhale collectively. James turned back to the assembled staff. I know that was difficult to witness. But I want to be transparent with all of you about the kind of leadership this hotel will have going forward. We value humanity over hierarchy. We believe that how you treat people, all people, matters more than how well you perform for those with power. He paused. Some of you may disagree with my decision to promote Miss Benson. Some of you may think it's unfair or unearned. If that's how you feel, I encourage you to give her a chance to prove herself. And if, after a fair period, you still believe this hotel isn't the right fit for you, we'll help you find positions elsewhere in the company or provide excellent references. Maria raised her hand. Mr. Westbrook? I've worked with Clara for 2 years. I've seen her handle difficult guests with grace, I've seen her work double shifts without complaint, and I've seen her treat everyone, from CEOs to custodians, with the same respect. If anyone can change this place for the better, it's her. Thank you, Maria, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. Others began to speak up. Jennifer shared a story about Clara staying late to help her learn a new computer system. Michael talked about the time Clara had defended him when Crane tried to fire him for being too friendly with guests. One by one, people who'd worked beside her, who'd seen her in moments of stress and kindness, spoke up. Not everyone. There were faces in the crowd that remained skeptical, arms crossed, expressions closed. But enough people spoke that Clara felt something in her chest unclench slightly. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she wasn't entirely alone. When the meeting finally ended, staff members filed out slowly, some stopping to congratulate Clara, others leaving without a word. Maria pulled her into a tight hug. Proud of you, Mija, she whispered. So damn proud. When the room had cleared except for James and Clara, he turned to her with a gentle smile. You handled that beautifully. I feel like I'm going to throw up, Clara admitted. That's normal. The first day is always the hardest. He checked his watch. We have a full schedule today. I'll be here for the rest of the week, helping you transition, introducing you to department heads, going over operations. But Clara. He met her eyes. What you said to Crane, that was perfect. That's exactly the kind of leader this hotel needs. Clara thought about Crane's face, about his threats, about the very real possibility that he was right and she would fail spectacularly. But she also thought about Maria's hug, about the staff members who defended her, about her mother's fierce belief that she could do this. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. Why are you really doing this? And please be honest. Is it guilt? Gratitude? Some kind of social experiment? James was quiet for a moment, considering. The honest answer? All of those things, a little. But mostly. He moved to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. I've spent 15 years building an empire. Acquiring hotels, maximizing profits, expanding the brand. And somewhere along the way, I forgot why I got into this business. I forgot that hospitality is supposed to be about people, not just revenue streams and market shares. He turned back to her. That night, standing in your lobby, being treated like garbage, it reminded me what it feels like to be powerless. And your kindness reminded me what it feels like to be seen. I need that reminder, Clara. This company needs it. So yes, I'm giving you this opportunity partly because you deserve it, but also because I'm hoping you'll help me remember what actually matters. The honesty in his voice struck something deep in Clara's chest. She realized suddenly that James Westbrook wasn't just giving her a job. He was trusting her with something precious, his own hope that the world could be better, that business could be done with humanity, that success and kindness weren't mutually exclusive. I'll do my best, she said simply. That's all anyone can ask. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and introductions. James walked Clara through the hotel's operations, the intricate dance of housekeeping schedules and kitchen management, the delicate balance of guest relations and staff satisfaction, the thousand tiny decisions that kept a luxury hotel running smoothly. Her head spun with information. Budget projections, occupancy rates, vendor contracts, maintenance schedules. It was overwhelming and exhilarating in equal measure. Every department head she met looked at her with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity, weighing whether this unexpected promotion would make their jobs easier or harder. By 6 o'clock, Clara's feet ached and her mind felt like it had been stuffed with more information than it could possibly hold. James finally called an end to the day. "Go home," he said gently. "Rest. Tomorrow we'll start on the real work, changing the culture here. But today was about introductions and information overload, and you've handled it like a champion." Clara gathered her things, which now included a laptop, access cards, and a stack of training materials, and headed for the door. But she paused at the threshold, looking back at James. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me, for believing in me, for giving me this chance." He smiled. "Thank you for being the kind of person worth believing in." The bus ride home felt different. Clara looked at her reflection in the window and saw someone new looking back. Not invisible. Not small. Someone with purpose and possibility and a future that stretched out in directions she'd never imagined. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "How was your first day as a boss lady?" Clara smiled and typed back, "Terrifying and amazing. Tell you everything tonight." Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. "This is James. I forgot to mention, you start receiving your new salary effective today. Health insurance is active immediately. Your mother's prescriptions should be covered as of now. Sleep well. You've earned it." Clara stared at the message, at the casual way he just transformed her mother's life with a few keystrokes, with benefits that had activated before she'd even worked a full day. She thought about the medications her mother had been rationing, about the specialist appointments they'd been putting off, about the constant weight of worry that had pressed on both their shoulders for years. That weight lifted, just slightly. Just enough to let her breathe. She typed back, "Thank you. For everything." His response came quickly, "You earned this, Clara. Never forget that." As the bus carried her home through the twilight city, Clara Benson allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in years, hope. Real, solid, tangible hope that tomorrow might be better than today. That she might actually be capable of the impossible thing she'd just agreed to do. That kindness, after all these years of being told it was weakness, might actually be her greatest strength. The weeks that followed were a baptism by fire. Clara arrived at the hotel each morning before dawn and left long after sunset, her mind constantly spinning with decisions that felt too large for one person to make. Should they renovate the lobby? Replace the outdated computer system? Restructure the housekeeping schedule? Every choice carried weight, carried consequences for people's livelihoods and the hotel's future. James was there for the first 2 weeks, a steady presence that kept her grounded when doubt threatened to pull her under. He taught her how to read financial reports, how to negotiate with vendors, how to handle difficult guests without compromising her values. But mostly, he taught her to trust her instincts. "You know more than you think you do," he told her one afternoon as they reviewed budget projections in her new office, the same office where Crane had once lectured her about knowing her place. "You've watched this hotel operate for 2 years. You've seen what works and what doesn't. Trust that knowledge." By the 3rd week, James had to return to New York to manage the rest of his properties. Clara stood in the lobby watching him prepare to leave, fighting the panic that rose in her throat. "You'll be fine," he said, reading her expression. "Better than fine. You're a natural at this." "I don't feel natural. I feel like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." "That feeling." James smiled. "That's called growth. It's uncomfortable because you're becoming someone new. Someone bigger than the person who used to make herself invisible." He picked up his briefcase. "I'm a phone call away if you need me. But Clara? You won't need me as much as you think." After he left, Clara stood in the lobby of her hotel, and it was hers now, in a way that still felt surreal, and took a deep breath. Time to prove she belonged here. The first real crisis came on a Thursday afternoon in her 4th week as manager. Clara was reviewing staffing schedules when Jennifer burst into her office, her face pale. "Clara, we have a situation. Mr. Whitmore, the guest in the presidential suite. He's refusing to check out, and his payment method was declined. He's saying his assistant made a mistake with the booking, that he needs to stay another 3 days, but he can't provide new payment information right now. Clara's stomach dropped. The presidential suite went for $5,000 a night. 3 more days without payment confirmation could mean a significant loss. The old Clara would have immediately called security, would have followed protocol designed to protect the hotel's bottom line. But she wasn't the old Clara anymore. "How has he been as a guest?" she asked Jennifer. "Honestly? Kind of demanding. He sent his breakfast back twice yesterday, complained about the water pressure, made one of the housekeepers cry because his towels weren't the right shade of white." Jennifer bit her lip. "But he's also a regular. Comes 3 or 4 times a year, usually stays for at least a week." Clara thought about James standing in this lobby, his cards declining, being treated like a criminal because of a technical issue. She thought about dignity and assumptions and the difference between someone running a scam and someone having a genuinely bad day. "Let me talk to him," she said. The presidential suite was in disarray when Clara arrived, room service trays everywhere, expensive luggage scattered about, the general chaos of someone who'd made themselves very comfortable. Mr. Whitmore himself was a man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of tan that spoke of yacht clubs and golf courses. "Mr. Whitmore," Clara said pleasantly. "I'm Clara Benson, the general manager. I understand we're having some payment difficulties." His face immediately shifted into defensive aggression. "This is ridiculous. I'm a valued guest at this hotel. I've stayed here dozens of times. One little technical issue and you people treat me like some kind of deadbeat." Clara remained calm. "No one is treating you like a deadbeat, sir. We're simply trying to resolve the payment situation. Can you tell me what happened with your assistant?" He hesitated, and Clara saw something flicker across his face. Not quite guilt, but close. "She made an error with the dates. Booked for 3 nights when I meant to stay for 6. But my credit card company flagged my account for suspicious activity, and I can't get it resolved until I'm back in New York on Monday." "I see." Clara studied him carefully. "Mr. Whitmore, can I ask you something? The housekeeper you made cry yesterday, what was her name?" He looked confused by the change in subject. "What? I didn't catch her name." "Her name is Teresa. She's been with this hotel for 8 years. She's a single mother of 2, and she takes tremendous pride in her work." Clara's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "The towels she brought you were the exact same towels we stock in every room, the same ones you've used on all your previous stays. So I'm curious what changed." Whitmore's face reddened. "I don't see what this has to do with." "It has everything to do with it, sir. Because I'm trying to determine what kind of guest you actually are. The kind who genuinely had a payment issue and deserves our help? Or the kind who uses his status as a weapon, who treats our staff poorly because he can, who tries to extend his stay without payment because he assumes we won't dare challenge someone who spends money here?" The room went very quiet. Whitmore stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "I could call the police right now," Clara continued. "Have you removed for non-payment. That's what my predecessor would have done. But I'm going to make you an offer instead. I'll extend your stay through the weekend at no additional charge. You'll check out Monday morning, at which point you'll settle your full bill, including the original 3 nights you've already stayed." "That's very generous, but—" "I'm not finished." Clara's voice sharpened. "In exchange, you will apologize to Teresa. A real apology, not some half-hearted sorry if you were offended nonsense. You will treat every staff member in this hotel with respect for the remainder of your stay. And you will understand that if we ever have another incident where you abuse our employees, you will be permanently banned from all Hayes International properties." Whitmore's mouth opened and closed. "You can't. I spend hundreds of thousands of dollars at this chain every year. You can't ban me for—" "For what?" "For making a young woman cry because your towels weren't white enough." Clara stood. "Mr. Whitmore, we want your business. But not at the cost of our staff's dignity. Those are the terms. Take them or leave them." He stared at her for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Clara could see the calculation happening, the cost of finding another hotel, the inconvenience, the blow to his ego if word got out he'd been kicked out. Finally, he nodded stiffly. "Fine. I'll apologize. Good. Teresa will be by to refresh your room at 4 o'clock. I expect you to be here. Clara moved toward the door, then paused. And Mr. Whitmore? We both know your credit card company didn't flag your account. We both know you were hoping to manipulate your way into free nights. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise. I'm giving you grace this once. Don't make me regret it. She left before he could respond, her heart hammering in her chest. Had she just made a huge mistake? Should she have been harder on him? Softer? Would he complain to James, cost her this job she'd barely started? But when she returned to her office, she found Teresa waiting outside, wringing her hands. Miss Benson? Mr. Whitmore just called down. He apologized. Really apologized. Said he was stressed about work and took it out on me, and that wasn't fair. Teresa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. No guest has ever apologized to me before. Not once in 8 years. Clara felt something tight in her chest loosen. You deserved that apology, Teresa. You deserve respect every single day. Thank you, Teresa whispered. Mr. Crane, he always told us to just take it when guests were rude. Said it was part of the job. But it never felt right. It's not part of the job anymore, Clara said firmly. Not at this hotel. Word of the Whitmore incident spread through the staff like wildfire. By the end of the day, Clara had received visits from 3 different employees, each with their own story of standing up to difficult guests, of setting boundaries, of treating the job like it involved human dignity rather than servitude. Maria found her at 7 that evening, still in her office reviewing reports. You need to go home, Mija, Maria said, settling into the chair across from Clara's desk. You've been here since 6 this morning. Just finishing these occupancy reports. We're down 15% from last year, and I'm trying to figure out why. I can tell you why. Crane ran this place like a prison. Word got around that we were rude to anyone who wasn't obviously rich. Bad reviews started piling up. Maria leaned forward. But you're changing that. People are already noticing. I heard 2 guests in the elevator today talking about how the staff seemed happier, more helpful. That's you. That's what you're building. Clara rubbed her tired eyes. I keep waiting for James to call and tell me I made a huge mistake with Whitmore. That I should have kicked him out, that I'm too soft. Did you do what you thought was right? Yes. Then that's all you can do. Maria stood, moving toward the door. Clara, can I tell you something? I've worked in hotels for 30 years. Seen a lot of managers come and go. And most of them they see us, the staff, as tools. Things to be used and replaced. But you? You see us as people. That's rare. That's special. Don't let the fear of making mistakes take that away from you. After Maria left, Clara sat in the quiet of her office, looking at the framed photo on her desk, her mother, smiling at the camera during a rare good day. She thought about the conversation they'd had last week, when Clara had taken her to see the specialist they'd been putting off for 2 years. The doctor had adjusted her mother's medications, prescribed treatments that the old insurance would never have covered. Her mother had cried in the car afterward, not from sadness but from relief. From the realization that she might actually get better, might have years she'd thought were lost. My baby did this, she'd whispered. My baby made this possible. Clara had wanted to tell her it wasn't her, it was James, it was luck, it was a series of coincidences that had nothing to do with her own merit. But her mother had gripped her hand and said, "Don't you dare diminish this. Don't you dare pretend you didn't earn every bit of what you have. You gave a man an umbrella in a storm, Clara. And he gave you the chance to be who you were always meant to be. That's not luck. That's grace recognizing grace." Now, sitting in her office in a hotel that was slowly becoming something better under her leadership, Clara allowed herself to believe it. Just a little. Just enough to keep going. Her phone buzzed. A text from James. Heard about the Whitmore situation. Brilliant handling. You're becoming exactly the leader I knew you could be. Clara smiled, exhaustion and pride mixing in her chest. She typed back, learning from the best. His response came quickly, no. You're teaching yourself. I just gave you the opportunity. Everything else is you. She closed her laptop, gathered her things, and headed out into the lobby. It was late enough that the space had quieted, just a few guests lingering in the bar, night staff moving through their routines. Clara paused for a moment, taking it all in. This was hers. This responsibility, this challenge, this impossible task of turning a place built on cruelty into something that honored kindness. It was overwhelming and terrifying, and she had no idea if she was actually succeeding or just fooling herself. But she was trying. Every day she was trying. And maybe for now, that was enough. What would you do if you were suddenly put in charge of a place that had treated you poorly? Would you lead with revenge or with grace? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how you'd handle this kind of power shift. 3 months passed like a dream Clara kept expecting to wake from. The Grand Crystal Hotel transformed under her leadership, not in dramatic, visible ways at first, but in the small moments that accumulated into something significant. Staff members smiled more readily. Guest complaints decreased by 40%. Online reviews began mentioning the warmth of the service, the genuine care of the employees. But the most significant change was harder to quantify. It lived in the way Teresa no longer flinched when guests spoke to her, in how Jennifer handled difficult situations with confidence rather than fear, in the fact that the hotel felt less like a battlefield and more like a place where people, both guests and staff, could simply be human. Clara still worked long hours, still second-guessed herself constantly, still sometimes felt like an imposter in expensive clothes. But she was learning, growing, becoming someone who could hold authority without wielding it as a weapon. James had visited twice since that first week, both times staying for just a day or two. Clara had expected him to micromanage, to hover, to constantly correct her decisions. Instead, he'd simply observed, asked thoughtful questions, and left her to lead. Their phone conversations became regular, weekly check-ins that evolved from purely professional discussions into something that felt like friendship. Or maybe something more. Clara tried not to think about that too hard. It was a Friday evening in early December when everything changed again. Clara was in her office reviewing plans for the hotel's holiday decorations. She wanted something elegant but warm, something that would make guests feel welcome rather than intimidated, when her assistant buzzed through. "Miss Benson? Mr. Westbrook is here to see you." Clara's heart did an embarrassing little flip. "Send him in." James entered carrying 2 cups of coffee from the cafe down the street, the good stuff, not the hotel's standard brew. He looked tired, she noticed. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there during his last visit. "Thought you could use a break," he said, offering her one of the cups. "You look like you need one more than me." Clara accepted the coffee gratefully. "Everything okay?" Long week. Board meetings, acquisition negotiations, the usual corporate warfare. He sank into the chair across from her desk with a sigh. "Sometimes I forget why I do this. Then I come here and remember. Here. To this hotel. To see what you've built." He gestured around the office, though Clara suspected he meant something larger. "I've been going through the quarterly reports. Guest satisfaction up 38%. Employee retention at an all-time high. Revenue increasing despite your decision to comp certain guests when circumstances warrant it." He smiled. "You're exceeding every projection I had for this property." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm just trying to do what you taught me." "No." James leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "You're doing what you always knew how to do. I just gave you permission to do it." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Clara, I need to tell you something. And I need you to hear it without immediately assuming it's about pity or gratitude or anything other than what it actually is." Her stomach fluttered nervously. "Okay." "These past 3 months, watching you transform this hotel, talking to you every week, seeing you grow into this role." He stopped, ran a hand through his hair in a gesture that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "I've been looking forward to these visits more than I should. Looking forward to our phone calls. Finding excuses to check in when I don't really need to." Clara's breath caught. "James. Let me finish." He stood, moved to the window, his back to her. "That night I met you, when you gave me an umbrella in a storm, I saw kindness. Genuine, uncomplicated kindness from someone who had no reason to offer it. And I've spent 3 months watching that kindness reshape an entire organization. Watching you prove that leading with humanity isn't weakness, it's the strongest thing a person can do. He turned back to face her. Somewhere in all of that, I started seeing you as more than an employee I believe in. More than a manager I'm mentoring. And I need to know. He paused, vulnerability written across his features in a way she'd never seen before. I need to know if there's any possibility you feel the same way. The office seemed to contract around them, the rest of the world falling away until it was just the two of them in this moment Clara had both hoped for and feared. She stood slowly, her coffee forgotten on the desk. I thought it was just me, she said quietly. I thought I was imagining things because you're you and I'm. Don't. James crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. Don't diminish yourself. Don't say you're just anything. You're extraordinary, Clara. You're brilliant and compassionate and brave in ways I'm still learning to be. I'm terrified, she admitted. Of this. Of us. Of what people will say, that I slept my way into this job, that you're taking advantage, that this whole thing was just some elaborate setup. People will say those things regardless of what we do, James said. The question is, do we let fear of other people's opinions keep us from something that could be? He reached for her hand, his touch warm and sure. Something that could be really good. Clara looked down at their joined hands, his pale against her darker skin, his scarred knuckles against her cleaning chemical roughened fingers. They were different in so many ways. But when she looked up and met his eyes, she saw the same uncertainty she felt, the same hope, the same longing for connection that transcended everything else. I think, she said slowly, that I've been falling for you since the moment you looked at me like I mattered. Since before I knew who you were. Since you were just a man in the rain who needed kindness. James's smile was like sunrise. That's all I've ever wanted to be. Just a man. Not a CEO, not a billionaire, not someone who's valued for what he can provide. Just a person who matters to someone who matters to him. He cupped her face gently, giving her time to pull away, to say no, to protect herself. But Clara had spent her whole life protecting herself, making herself small, choosing safety over possibility. She was tired of that life. She kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing this new territory. But then James's arms came around her, and Clara felt herself melt into him, felt 3 months of tension and longing and carefully suppressed feelings pour out in this one perfect moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. I should probably mention, he said with a shaky laugh, that there are rules about workplace relationships. Disclosure forms, HR protocols, conflict of interest policies. I know. I read the employee handbook cover to cover. Clara smiled. We'll follow all the rules. Be completely transparent. Do everything by the book. Good. Because I don't want anyone thinking this is anything other than what it is. 2 people who found each other in unusual circumstances and decided to see where it leads. And where does it lead? James pulled back slightly, his hand still on her waist, his expression serious. Honestly? I don't know. I've never been good at relationships. I work too much, I'm too focused on the business, I forget to call and lose track of time and generally make a mess of things. I've never really had a relationship, Clara admitted. I was always too busy surviving, too focused on taking care of my mother, too convinced I didn't deserve anything good. Then maybe, James said softly, we can figure it out together. Make our own rules. Build something that works for us. I'd like that. They stood there for a moment longer, holding each other in the quiet of her office while the hotel hummed with life around them. Then James sighed reluctantly. I should let you get back to work. And I have a dinner meeting with the Chicago Tourism Board in an hour. Such a glamorous life, Clara teased. Exhausting is more accurate. He kissed her forehead. Have dinner with me tomorrow? Somewhere that's not hotel-related? Just us. I'd love that. After he left, Clara sank back into her chair, her lips still tingling, her heart racing with possibility and terror in equal measure. She picked up her phone and called the one person who would understand. Baby. Her mother answered on the second ring. What's wrong? You never call during work. Nothing's wrong, Mama. Something's really right, actually. She told her mother everything, about James's visit, about his confession, about the kiss that had felt like both an ending and a beginning. Her mother listened in silence, the kind of weighted quiet that meant she was processing deeply. "Are you happy?" Diane finally asked. Clara considered the question. Was she happy? Or was she just relieved to be wanted? Was this real, or was she projecting fairy tale narratives onto a complicated situation? But then she thought about James's vulnerability, about the way he'd looked at her like she hung the moon, about the fact that he'd spent 3 months watching her grow without trying to control or change her. She thought about how her chest felt lighter when she heard his voice, about how she caught herself smiling at random moments, just remembering their conversations. "Yes," she said. "I think I am. Or I'm starting to be. Is that okay?" "Baby, you've spent 28 years believing happiness was for other people. That you didn't deserve good things. That your purpose was to serve and sacrifice and make yourself small so others could be comfortable." Her mother's voice was fierce with love. "If this man makes you feel like you matter, like you're enough exactly as you are, then yes, it's more than okay. It's everything I've ever wanted for you." "I'm scared, Mama." "Good. Be scared. But don't let that fear stop you from reaching for something beautiful." The next 6 months were a study in balance. Clara and James navigated their relationship with careful transparency, filing the appropriate disclosures with HR, maintaining professional boundaries at work, being scrupulously careful not to let their personal connection interfere with business decisions. It wasn't always easy. There were staff members who whispered, who speculated, who assumed Clara's success was due to sleeping with the boss rather than her own competence. There were moments when Clara's old insecurities reared up, when she wondered if she was just a novelty to James, a redemption project that would lose its appeal once the shine wore off. But James was patient. Steady. He showed up to their relationship the same way he showed up to everything, with full presence and genuine care. He met her mother, sat in Diane's small apartment drinking tea and listening to stories about Clara's childhood. He celebrated when Clara's mother's health improved dramatically, when she was finally able to reduce her medications and start physical therapy. And slowly, Clara began to believe she deserved this. All of it. The hotel continued to thrive. Clara implemented new training programs focused on empathy and service. She created employee wellness initiatives, improved benefits, started a scholarship fund for staff members' children. Under her leadership, the Grand Crystal Hotel became known not just for luxury, but for heart. It was a warm evening in June, exactly 1 year after that rainy night when everything changed, that James asked Clara to meet him at the hotel after her shift. He wouldn't say why, just that it was important. Clara arrived to find the lobby transformed. Candles everywhere, rose petals scattered across the floor, soft music playing from hidden speakers. The staff had all left for the day. Jennifer had been suspiciously insistent that Clara didn't need to stay late, and the space felt intimate despite its grand scale. James stood in the center of the lobby, in the exact spot where Clara had handed him an umbrella a year ago. He was in a suit, but he'd loosened his tie, and his eyes held that vulnerability she'd come to cherish. "A year ago," he said as Clara approached slowly, "I stood in this spot and had one of the worst and best nights of my life. The worst because I was reminded how cruel people can be when they think you're powerless. The best because I met someone who changed everything I thought I knew about the world." Clara's heart was hammering. "James, what is this?" "This is me, asking you something I've wanted to ask for months but kept talking myself out of because it seemed too fast, too complicated, too impossible." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Clara Benson, you've spent the past year proving that kindness isn't weakness. That leading with your heart doesn't mean you can't be strong. That the richest things in life have nothing to do with money and everything to do with how we treat each other." He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the candlelight and threw it back in brilliant fragments. It was beautiful, elegant but not ostentatious, a design that felt both timeless and personal. "I love you," James said simply. "I love your compassion and your strength. I love how you make everyone around you feel valued. I love that you gave a stranger an umbrella in a storm and changed both our lives forever." He dropped to one knee. "Marry me. Build a life with me. Show me every day what it means to be truly human." Clara was crying, happy tears, overwhelmed tears, tears that contained a year's worth of transformation and hope. She thought about the woman she'd been, standing behind this desk, making herself invisible, believing her purpose was to serve without being seen. She thought about her mother's words, Be scared and do it anyway. Yes, she said through her tears. Yes, absolutely yes. James stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, Clara was laughing and crying simultaneously. I can't believe you did this here, she said, gesturing at the transformed lobby. This is where we began. Where you saw me when I was trying not to be seen. Where everything changed. James wiped her tears gently with his thumbs. I wanted to honor that. To remind us both that the best things in life come from the smallest acts of kindness. Clara looked around the lobby, this space she'd once cleaned and worked in and felt so small inside. Now it was hers. Their story. The place where two people had found each other across the divide of class and circumstance and decided that maybe, just maybe, the world could be better than they'd been taught to expect. I love you, she said. I love you for seeing me. For believing in me. For being patient while I learned to believe in myself. You did that part on your own, James said. I just held up a mirror and showed you what was already there. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony at the Grand Crystal Hotel. The guest list was intimate: Clara's mother, James's family, the hotel staff who had become Clara's chosen family. Maria cried through the entire ceremony. Jennifer caught the bouquet. Teresa gave a toast about how Clara had taught her that kindness was power, not weakness. The hotel that had once symbolized everything wrong with the world, its cruelty, its hierarchies, its casual dismissal of human dignity, became a monument to everything right. Under Clara's continued leadership, it wasn't just profitable. It was transformative. A place where people came not just to be served, but to be seen. Standing at the altar with James, Clara thought about the umbrella. That small, simple object that had somehow contained the seeds of everything that came after. She thought about her mother's fierce belief that she deserved good things. She thought about Maria's encouragement, Jennifer's loyalty, all the people who had seen her potential before she could see it herself. But mostly, she thought about James's gray eyes looking at her in the rain, tired and sad and somehow hopeful. About how they'd both been testing something that night, he testing humanity, she testing her own courage to be kind in a cruel world. They'd both passed. As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, as James pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise, Clara heard her mother's voice from the front row, full of joy and pride. That's my baby. That's my girl. And Clara, who had spent so many years making herself small, allowing herself to be diminished, finally, fully understood what her mother had always known. She wasn't small. She never had been. She'd just been waiting for the right moment to take up space. To be seen. To believe that a woman who gave away umbrellas in storms could also be a woman who transformed hotels, who married billionaires, who proved that the richest hearts were the simplest clothes. 5 years later, the Grand Crystal Hotel had become the crown jewel of Hayes International Hotels. It appeared in every Best Hotels in Chicago list, was featured in magazines and travel blogs, became the property other hotels tried to emulate. But its reputation wasn't built on luxury alone, it was built on the culture Clara had created, on the understanding that true hospitality meant honoring every person who walked through its doors. Clara and James now co-owned the entire Hayes International chain, partners in every sense of the word. They'd expanded the model Clara created: empathy-driven hospitality, staff-focused management, the revolutionary idea that treating people well was good business, to all 43 properties. They had a daughter now, 3-year-old Grace, who had James's gray eyes and Clara's fierce compassion. Grace liked to help at the hotel, handing guests flowers from the lobby arrangements, asking everyone their names, treating the housekeeping staff like beloved aunts. Diane's health had stabilized completely. She volunteered at the hotel twice a week, running a program that trained formerly incarcerated individuals for hospitality careers. Everyone deserves a second chance, she told Clara. Everyone deserves to be seen as more than their worst moment. On the anniversary of that rainy night, now a date they celebrated privately each year, Clara and James stood in the lobby late in the evening, watching their daughter sleep in James's arms, watching the hotel wind down from another successful day. Do you ever think about it? Clara asked. About what would have happened if you'd gone to a different hotel that night? If someone else had given you an umbrella? James considered this, adjusting Grace's weight slightly. I think I would have kept looking until I found what I was looking for. But I'm glad it was you. Glad I didn't have to keep searching. What were you looking for, exactly? Proof, he said simply. That the world wasn't as cold as I'd started to believe. That there were still people who led with their hearts. That kindness hadn't been completely commodified and sold to the highest bidder. He looked at her, love evident in every line of his face. You were the proof, Clara. You still are. Clara leaned into him, the three of them standing in the lobby where it had all begun. She thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, exhausted, overlooked, convinced her purpose was to be invisible. She thought about the umbrella, about the choice to be kind when cruelty would have been easier. She thought about how one small act of compassion had changed everything. You know what I learned? Clara said softly. From all of this. What's that? That we're all just people in the rain, looking for shelter. Some of us have umbrellas. Some of us don't. But the only thing that really matters is whether we're willing to share what we have with someone who needs it. She smiled up at him. Everything else, the money, the success, the transformation, it's all just an extension of that one simple truth. James kissed her forehead. You should write that down. Put it in the employee handbook. Maybe I will. They stood there a moment longer, a family built from kindness, watching the rain start to fall outside the hotel's windows. Somewhere in the city, someone else was caught in a storm. Somewhere, someone else was being tested. Would they choose cruelty or compassion? Would they see the person in front of them, or just their own assumptions? Clara hoped they'd choose kindness. She hoped they'd remember that the richest hearts really do wear the simplest clothes. That sometimes, the person you help in their lowest moment becomes the person who helps you reach heights you never imagined. That an umbrella given in a storm can change the world, or at least, it can change two worlds that needed changing. And that love, real, transformative, world-shifting love, often begins with the smallest act of seeing another person's humanity and choosing to honor it. You know what I learned? Clara said softly. From all of this. What's that? That we're all just people in the rain, looking for shelter. Some of us have umbrellas. Some of us don't. But the only thing that really matters is whether we're willing to share what we have with someone who needs it. She smiled up at him. Everything else, the money, the success, the transformation, it's all just an extension of that one simple truth. James kissed her forehead. You should write that down. Put it in the employee handbook. Maybe I will. They stood there a moment longer, a family built from kindness, watching the rain start to fall outside the hotel's windows. Somewhere in the city, someone else was caught in a storm. Somewhere, someone else was being tested. Would they choose cruelty or compassion? Would they see the person in front of them, or just their own assumptions? Clara hoped they'd choose kindness. She hoped they'd remember that the richest hearts really do wear the simplest clothes. That sometimes, the person you help in their lowest moment becomes the person who helps you reach heights you never imagined. That an umbrella given in a storm can change the world, or at least, it can change two worlds that needed changing. And that love, real, transformative, world-shifting love, often begins with the smallest act of seeing another person's humanity and choosing to honor it.